Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, the UK-Africa Investment Conference has taken place this week, providing yet another opportunity for the G7 nation to meet its ambitions of becoming one of the world's largest investors on the continent. Ben Jones, the British Deputy High Commissioner, Lagos, Nigeria, will be joining me to provide insights on some of these trade ambitions. And organisers have announced that the theme for this year's Earth Day is Invest in Our Planet, to encourage the global transition to an equitable, prosperous green economy for all. The Regional Director Africa at earthday.org, Mugisha Derrick, will be joining me from Kampala, Uganda. He'll be providing insight on how the continent plans to mark this year's holiday. Then later, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest company news stories of the week. But first, as always, let's start the show with news from here in the UK, where earlier in the week it was revealed that the country's rate of inflation rose to its highest level in 30 years, to 5.4% in December. The increase is mostly coming from food and drink, followed by restaurants and hotels. This latest data comes as the cost of living crisis deepens in the country. With inflation likely to hit 6.5% in April, the Bank of England looked set to raise interest rates again when they meet next month. It's been reported that dozens of Conservative Party MPs who won their seats at the last general election have been meeting to discuss how to resolve their concerns about Prime Minister Boris Johnson's embattled premiership. A growing number have already submitted letters of no confidence in his leadership. The Prime Minister faced Sir Keir Starmer at PMQs on Wednesday.
Mr. Speaker, like many on these benches, I spent weeks and months defending the Prime Minister against often angry constituents. I've reminded them of his success in delivering Brexit and on the vaccine and many other things. But I expect my leaders to shoulder the responsibility for the actions they take. Yesterday, he did the opposite of that. So I'll remind him of a quotation altogether too familiar to him of Leo Amery to Neville Chamberlain. You have sat there too long for all the good you have done. In the name of God, go.
Order. Prime Minister.
I must say to the right honourable gentleman, I don't know what he's talking about, but what I can tell him, I don't know what quotation he's alluding to that he's referring. But what I can tell him is that I think I've told this House repeatedly throughout this pandemic, I take full responsibility for everything done in this government and throughout the pandemic.
Well, earlier I spoke with our business correspondent Simon Pusey for some analysis. Simon, Sue Gray's name has been mentioned countless times this week. Will the Prime Minister survive until the outcome of her report?
I think that's a really hard question to answer. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think anyone in the Conservative Party knows or anyone in government knows. But I think there is a school of thought that this threshold of 52 names that is needed to be sent in terms of letters to raise a leadership question, to remove Boris Johnson, a lot of people within government think that that's almost close to being met. A lot of people have been putting their names in. I think there's two schools of thought, really, whether this week they'll reach that number of letters needed, 52 names, or whether people will wait. I think there's the bands of thought within the Conservative Party. Half of the people there are saying, no, we're going to follow the advice or the party line, that is, we need to wait for Sue Gray's official report. And then half of people are like, this is so embarrassing. That, a lot of Conservative Party members are getting letters from constituents saying this is how outrageous this is, and stories of people not being able to attend funerals. This obviously all relates to that party in May. It seems like there were a lot of parties. I think we've lost count. It was 11 the last time I checked, but there were these Friday drinks. But the main one was where this email was sent to 100 Conservative MPs saying, come to this garden party. Around 30 people showed up, including the Prime Minister and his wife. So it's all really surrounding that because there's hard evidence that this took place. But it is very embarrassing and quite unedifying for the government that this is making international news around the world. This was leading, maybe not leading the headlines, but it was in the American press for a long time, and it seems ridiculous that it's got to this stage. So Whether there are more embarrassing allegations this week, I think it'll depend on that. But at the moment, yeah, it looks like it will take Sue Gray. And I don't think the Prime Minister is going to resign. I don't think Boris Johnson is someone who resigns. He is going to have to be forced out. So I think one way or another, Boris Johnson won't survive this. The question, as you say, is will it be this week or will it be in the future when Sue Gray releases her report? And remember, Sue Gray is interviewing Dominic Cummings. That's sort of a fairly recent update. Dominic Cummings really doesn't like the Prime Minister, and he is the one who's sort of stirring a lot of this and releasing a lot of the allegations. And he is the one who said he told the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, that this was illegal, this was against the rules that he'd set, and Boris Johnson has said unequivocally he didn't. So who does Sue Gray believe, and is there hard evidence that Dominic Cummings did tell the Prime Minister or someone else did? It'll all rest on that, I think.
Just a quick follow-up question, Simon. I've got to ask, what's the public's perception, particularly when we heard that Downing Street staff threw a wild party on the night before the Duke of Edinburgh was buried? We all remember that picture of Her Majesty sitting alone. It can't get any worse than that, surely. No,
well, that's just yet another in a long line of things that the government, did and don't want to be released. And I think at the time, it's because Boris Johnson, there's a wide sort of school of thought that he's the leader, but he kind of does his own thing and everyone else sort of followed suit. I don't think Boris Johnson was organising these parties, but they were kind of, held in that kind of regard, and people follow the leader, and if he's not following the rules, then why should they? I think the public, we all remember in those times people stuck to the rules pretty much, and the police enforced the rules, and there's lots of stories doing the rounds of people being arrested for this or fined for that, or not going to funerals, not going to weddings, obeying the rules. And it was a hard time, obviously, and then it doesn't really matter what actually happened. It's the perception that the government were partying or were not following the rules themselves that is making people very angry, and understandably so. So I think, especially with the Queen and that picture of her sitting alone in Westminster Abbey when her husband was being buried, that's a visual image of that. And there aren't many visual images. There's a spattering of them in the Downing Street garden, but that's a really, really powerful image. And I think that just really highlights, what a lot of people are feeling, that image there.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Let's change gear now and focus on this week's UK-Africa Investment Conference, which took place on Thursday. With Russia and China increasing their influence in Africa, the UK has accelerated plans to become the largest G7 investor on the continent in the next few years. By 2050, 1 in 4 global consumers will be African, and Africa is home to several of the fastest growing economies in the world. This week's virtual UK-Africa Investment Conference served as a springboard to ongoing trade negotiations. Ben Llewellyn-Jones, the British Deputy High Commissioner, Lagos, Nigeria, joins me now for more on the UK's trade ambitions with the country. British Deputy High Commissioner, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on Channel's Business Global today. Let me ask, has the outcome of COP26 changed the way Britain wants to invest in Africa?
I think it has, in the sense that COP26 it's a moment of climax in terms of how we are trying to encourage investment, both from the UK but globally in Africa, particularly when it comes to supporting a just energy transition. And I think what COP26 showed and helped reach agreement on was the significant amount of climate finance that needed to be made available to Africa, but also the immense opportunities in things like renewable energy that we in the UK, but we hope globally others are trying to support. So I think it catalysed, it certainly crystallised, I think, that new kind of green, clean investment. And we're very keen to push that from the UK and with our partners.
The British government has insisted that strengthening their economic connections on the continent is a priority. I believe Vicky Ford, the Minister for Africa, has mentioned that on several occasions over the past couple of weeks. What role does Nigeria play in this?
A very significant role. Nigeria is still the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa. And obviously with its growth potential, both in terms of population, but also in terms of GDP, and its strategic location in West Africa. I mean, I'm sitting in Lagos, and you really feel like you're at the heart of commercial enterprise in Africa, certainly in West Africa. I think Nigeria is critical. And I think what the UK government sees when it sees Africa is both the strong and historical links, but also the exciting and innovative new areas like tech, like renewable energy, where Nigeria is at the cutting edge and where British and Nigerian partnership and indeed investment can make a real difference.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about the kind of support that the High Commission in Lagos is providing to Nigerian businesses, because that was one of the key themes of this week's UK-Africa Investment Conference, Britain offering support. Can you give us some examples of what you've been doing?
Absolutely. So we have a whole range of tools at our disposal, not least CDC, British International Investment, which is looking for investment opportunities across Nigeria, has been a major investor in the power sector here in Nigeria with Azura Power. Secondly, we've got UK Export Finance, which is looking to de-risk significant, not just British, but significant multinational opportunities in Nigeria, looking at the supply chain, looking at big infrastructure projects. We've got one or two in mind. And then thirdly, we have the suite of expertise we have on the ground. My team here in Lagos, colleagues in Abuja and scattered across Nigeria, who know the new sectors Nigeria's economy is growing into: creatives, renewable energy, tech, agriculture, manufacturing, and not simply focused on oil and gas. So all of that expertise, that insight, that connection making is made available to anyone who's interested. And really, we've had some huge successes. Connexa, big renewable energy investment. I mentioned Azura, certainly looking at others which are yet to be announced, but we're keen to see soon. And the Africa Investment Conference this week showcased three really big opportunities, two in Lagos, the Lagos Waterways Initiative, trying to get people to invest in transport in Lagos. 2/3 of Lagos is water, very little freight and passenger transport. Secondly, Echo Atlantic, big education opportunities, health opportunities. And thirdly, the Abuja Industrial Park, which has got some really, really exciting possibilities, both in terms of energy and manufacturing. So plenty of opportunities, and we're here to help people realise them.
Yeah, you've highlighted some major opportunities there, especially, making use of the waterways. We do that pretty successfully here in London. But for some of us, we're sick of hearing about opportunities. The opportunity should have come yesterday. Honestly, is insecurity and the lack of infrastructure still a major concern for some investors? Is that off-putting?
Well, I mean, clearly there are challenges in investing anywhere in the world, and for Nigeria, security is a challenge we're working with the Nigerian authorities on. Infrastructure struggles to advance at the same rate as population growth, a challenge of capacity there. But I see infrastructure at least as an opportunity, because leapfrogging some of the traditional infrastructure when it comes to technology that we've seen in the West, finding new solutions that meet Africa's needs, that's something we can work together on. And when it comes to security, I always say to potential investors, let's think through the problem, the challenge. Where are you trying to do business? Because again, we can provide advice to people who are thinking about parts of Nigeria that are perhaps look off-putting, but where solutions can be found. And I think, again, our role on the ground, and we've been very successful in this, is to help people navigate the market. And they do so, and very successfully.
Absolutely. It's hard to ignore the growth and the success of the last mile logistics sector, as well as the gig economy. But we know not everybody is as tech savvy. There is one piece of data here that suggests that around 85% of Africa's economic activity is generated in the informal sector. How can heads of state, let's talk about Nigeria and Lagos, encourage a digital transformation of trade?
I think there's a number of ways. I mean, the first thing is to try and get that infrastructure across, that broadband infrastructure, that connectivity across Nigeria. And we've been working with the federal government, but also state governments to roll out rights of way and try and just smooth that path so more people can get access to the digital economy. The second is to regulate, but proportionately. And again, working with financial technology operators and bank operators on how that can be done. So things like mobile money really do reach people for whom this is going to be a game-changing innovation in terms of how they pay, how they deal with the economy. And thirdly, I think is to use Instagram, Twitter, these kinds of tools. I mean, I'm sitting in Lagos, and if I wanted to book a cake for my wife's birthday party, as I'm going to go on Instagram and do that, because that's how you do it. So I think just embracing the technology and allowing that and providing a safe space for businesses and a predictable space for that to happen is really important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, British Deputy High Commissioner, for your time. Hopefully, on your next stop off in London, you can come and visit us in the studio. Thank you so much. In a few minutes, I'll be speaking with the Regional Director Africa at earthday.org, Mugisha Derrick. But before then, here's some company news for you. Shares of Sony dropped as much as 9.8% in the opening minutes of trading in Japan, just a day after Microsoft's $75 billion bid for Activision Blizzard. The deal is set to become Microsoft's biggest ever buyout and the largest deal in gaming history. Shares in Nintendo and Konami rose as much as 2.87% on Wednesday morning as speculation grows that they could become acquisition targets of Sony or as part of a broader land grab across the country's lucrative gaming sector. Australia's unemployment rate unexpectedly dropped to 4.2% last month, its lowest level in over 13 years. The robust data has sparked speculation among economists that there could be an imminent hike to interest rates. Employers across the country are still struggling to fill an historically high number of job vacancies. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the figures account for a period of time just prior to an explosion of Omicron cases. This week, Hugo Boss reported its strongest quarterly sales in history, which almost propelled the German fashion house back to pre-pandemic levels. The company said revenue rose 43% last year to 2.79 billion euros, bringing revenue to just 1% below its 2019 result of 2.88 billion. The full balance sheet will be published on the 10th of March. The world's top-selling car maker, Toyota, has announced that it no longer expects to meet its annual production target, with operations hampered by the global chip crunch. In September, the Japanese giant lowered the number of vehicles it hopes to make in the year to March 22 to 9 million, down from 9.3 million. But bosses said Tuesday that fresh cuts to a planned bumper factory output next month meant it was unlikely to meet its new target. Now to our next topic. 3 months ahead of the annual holiday, Earth Day, this year's theme has been announced as Invest in Our Planet. Organisers say that planned events will centre around accelerating solutions to combat our greatest threat, climate change, by encouraging observers to recognise our collective responsibility. The organisation notes that COP26 outcomes made it clearer than ever that governments are not doing enough to support a global green economy. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by the Regional Director, Africa at earthday.org, Mugisha Derrick. He joins me from Kampala in Uganda. Mugisha Derrick, it's a pleasure to have you back on Channels Business Global. So this year's theme is Invest in Our Planet. Can you tell us what's the meaning behind that?
Yeah, so Earth Day 2022 is focused on accelerating action, reframing the conversation and bringing us all together to really understand that this is within our reach and we can really, within our collective power, try to invest and maybe through businesses all coming together. Let's talk about governments coming together, individuals, all of us rallying together to see that we can bring all the necessary energies, investments to fight the biggest threat to our existence, which is the climate crisis. So the theme is really looking at all our contribution towards securing the future of this planet. So that is what we are really aiming at for when we talk about investing in our planet.
Yeah, you've mentioned a lot of the stakeholders. I think a lot of the climate emergency and the solutions have been dumped on the doorsteps of policymakers, which does make sense. But of course, we know that the biggest contributor is us. And how do you think now the conversation can translate to the general public so they know that it's our collective responsibility too?
Yeah, so you find that, of course, businesses have been at the forefront of actually the destruction because of the different economic activities they do take part. But again, you also need to balance it with development. So how we can get everyone on board is we are fighting for our survival. And when you're fighting for our survival, there's nothing to be, small about it. We have to go hard, on trying to secure ourselves. Otherwise, we shall all die. So communities and societies need to know that for them to be able to survive, they need to have nature in place. They need to have solutions that can enable us to exist, but also to make sure that their businesses will not be affected by the crisis itself. Otherwise, the moment we keep not acting, then again, you can't do business. So that business as usual of not acting, of destroying without, rethinking the models of maybe, production models, societies, maybe our consumption models as well. So we have to, all of us, work together towards seeing that we have a secure future. That's why all societies need to be concerned.
Absolutely. A lot of people may not realise this, but Earth Day is actually a huge celebration. It's been going on now for more than 50 years. In April, we do expect so many different events to take place on the said day. What plans does the organisation have to mark the occasion on the continent?
Yeah, so always the first kind of thing we do whenever we come up with such a theme is to make sure that all of us are going to do something coming up to that day. So already we have already passed 100 days. So now we are left with around 93 days to Earth Day. So what we always do here is we try to help people to organize events, and also we organize events like cleanups. They can be able to plant trees. They can organize workshops, for example. They can bring their communities together, so that we can all have a conversation. Because what you're talking about is maybe seeing businesses innovate more, governments, providing incentives that are really positive for the planet, and seeing that maybe people can even keep up the pressure, or see that we can, transit from our consumption pattern. So we're also making sure that for countries that are going into elections, the voting, they can speak with one voice in terms of maybe electing leaders that are really for the environment, for the, trying to act on the climate crisis, not, them refusing to come and vote. And we have leaders who are not responsible, who don't care about our planet. So, because this is about accountability for everyone. So what we do is we're going to organize a big festival in Zimbabwe, and we have always activities that happen in countries like Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Zambia, because we cover the whole of the sub-Saharan region. That's the coverage of our work. So we are trying to enable that people have actions, governments are in place to also take part, but also businesses this time. We are really counting on them as key stakeholders in terms of their financial muscle, but also their way in which they can innovate. So that's what we always do.
I think Mugisha, you've raised a really interesting point there. We're running out of time. You've mentioned political leaders using their platform, especially if they're campaigning, to talk about environmental issues. But we are just, as you said, about 90 odd days away from the big day. What changes are you hoping that this extra attention on the planet and on the climate emergency will take place in Africa? Because we do know that at times, they are set aside in the conversation. All the big action plans are taking place in the global north, but the climate emergency is hitting us the hardest. So
for me, what we hope as well is to see that maybe we can put an end to fossil fuels, because this is something that has really gone on for quite a long time. We are discussing after COP26, meaning we have had 26 years of discussing with all political parties, or all countries and parties, and all parties to the Convention of Climate, the UNFCCC. So what we need to see is for them to say, enough is enough. We can come up with really very new technologies, maybe invest in renewable energy, talk about innovative agriculture, looking at sustainable agriculture food systems that really do not harm the planet. So we hope these things can come up all into as this investment. So the investment we're asking for, because the funding gap is really big if you have to act on the crisis. It's, billions of money each and every year, or over like 800, kind of billion every year. So we need more of the financial thing to invest. So do not invest in practices that are endangering our planet, but invest in solutions and opportunities that will help, all of us solve the climate crisis.
Yes, that's a great call to action to end the show on. Mugisha Derrick, the Regional Director for Africa for earthday.org. Thank you so much, and good luck with all your planning. Thanks. Thank you. Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today, but do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.